In today's video, we're talking about how Xbox might be beating PlayStation to the next generation. We're also talking about an awesome update for the PS5 and if games are just too long. How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne, and while yes, we are in October, here in Michigan, it's like 80 degrees right now, so I had to break out the short sleeves again, which is a bummer, right? Like, I moved back to Michigan, I was so excited for the fall weather, and man, I haven't even gotten it this month. But that does not stop me from playing a bunch of awesome video games. I rolled right through my RE5 playthrough right into Resident Evil 6. I've played Resident Evil 6 1,000 times probably. I've never beat it, so this time around, I'm kind of working my way backwards from my least favorite campaigns all the way up to my favorite. So I'm starting with Jake, and then I'm going to do Chris and then Leon. Maybe that will make it a more fun experience that I can actually finish. I just don't want to think about how it came out 11 years ago. All right, so the first news story we have to talk about today is surrounding the PS6 and the Xbox Series 2, Xbox Series Y. I'm just going to call it the Xbox 2 because that's what I thought would come after the Xbox One, and then they go do the Series X and Series S. I don't really know what's going on over there, but we now know through leaks the release dates of both the PS6 and this new Xbox console, and it's actually kind of surprising. So we all saw those Microsoft leaks a couple weeks ago that basically let us know that we are going to get a mid-gen refresh of the Xbox Series X, but it's going to be just the same console repackaged into a new chassis. So it's going to be circular shaped, it's going to have no disk drive, and it's going to be a little bit more efficient, but we're not really going to notice any change performance wise. Now that's all well and good for the Xbox side of the fence, because as Digital Foundry has said, the Xbox Series X apparently is powerful enough to the point where you could get games that run better on the Xbox Series X than the PS5, but probably because no one really has the Xbox Series X compared to the PS5. PS5 is the benchmark standard, so when they port games over to the Series X, they kind of just keep them at the same level, or shockingly below the level of the PlayStation 5. And as far as what we can expect out of that PS5 Pro, one of the big marketing points is apparently going to be 8K gaming. I would not hold my breath for that outside of like indie games. Maybe Dead Cells will get an update down the line that lets it run at 8K. But if the PS5 console we have now can't even run games at 4K locked 30, that kind of tells you what you should expect when it comes to 8K gaming. I don't even know why they're marketing that as a feature on the current PS5. Just because you can plug it into an 8K TV and the operating system will output in 8K, that's not really worth putting the badge on the box if you ask me, because we're not going to see anything close to that in the near future. So what I would expect from this console though is 4K 30 locked, like a native 4K resolution, or an upscaled 1440p or 1080p to 4K running at 60 FPS. Unfortunately, this generation still hasn't really started yet, but the games that we do have, the few of them, they're targeting 30 FPS on this current gen console, and that's what we're going to see going forward. It seems like it's just going to be like every other generation where, you know, at the beginning of the generation we get cross-gen games, they run at higher resolutions and higher frame rates, and then as time goes on and we start to see games that actually need the new hardware, well, the first thing to go when they hit the wall is frame rate, right? Like, we're going to start seeing 30 FPS pretty much across the board. And honestly, I don't really feel one way or the other there. Like, on the one hand, I feel like they kind of shot themselves in the foot at both Microsoft and Sony by releasing cross-gen games on these consoles for so long, because we get 60 FPS games for a long time and people start to see it as a standard. But on the other hand, these consoles are $500, right? Like, to get 1440p or 4K 60 on the PC side of the fence, you're going to be paying around $1,500 or maybe even $2,000. So when you take that into consideration, the fact that you're paying a third of the price of a PC that can do what you're expecting out of the PlayStation 5, it's not really that big of a deal if you ask me. Also, from a pure fidelity standpoint, I kind of want a graphical leap like we used to see back in the day when we would go from the PS2 to the PS3 or the PS3 to the PS4. Like, those were big noticeable changes, and even with games like Dead Space or Final Fantasy 16 or Jedi Survivor, if you compare them to the PS4 games we were getting a few years ago, they're not really that better looking, right? Like, you see stuff like ray tracing sometimes, or you see bigger worlds sometimes, or you see better shadows and weird indirect lighting and things like that. They're all little things that do add up over time, but you know, they're incremental and small. So it is really tough to see the difference between current gen games and last gen games. So if we're going to get more power, I'm fine with 30 FPS being the trade-off if that means games are actually going to start looking next gen, kind of like Cyberpunk's Phantom Liberty expansion. That looks absolutely next gen to me. It looks awesome. But the biggest leak we've seen around the Xbox 2 and the PS6 is that one downside of Sony investing time, money, and energy into making a PS5 Pro, this bigger mid-gen refresh, is that we're going to be waiting much longer for the PS6 than it seems like we're going to be waiting for the Xbox 2. So basically what we're hearing is that the Xbox 2, the sequel to the Xbox Series X, could be coming out as early as 2026, and the PS6 could be coming out as late as 2027 or 2028. So regardless, the Xbox Series X2 is going to come out sooner, and the PS6 is going to take at least 18 months to come out after it. Now, there's a few ways to look at this, and honestly, I feel like this is going to be a boon for Sony overall, just because if Xbox is putting out a console in 2026, that means they're going to be working with 2026 tech. The only reason people think they're going to be able to do this is that instead of what Sony's doing, which is focusing on a mid-gen refresh, Xbox just moved right on to the next Xbox. That's why they're able to release it in 2026, right? Like they only worked on one successor console instead of two. Whereas Sony has the challenge of making a PS5 Pro competitive, but then they have to make the PS6 look like a massive upgrade over both the original PS5 and the PS5 Pro, so they obviously need to wait a little bit longer to release that console. But because of that, it stands to reason that maybe the PS6 will be more powerful than the next Xbox, and even if it's not, we've seen this generation where developers are targeting the PS5 even though they have markedly more headroom on the current Series X. So either way, Sony wins. I'm just wondering if Microsoft is able to do what they're trying to do with Game Pass, which is get a new next-gen game every quarter or so, and they have this big library of games ready to go for the next generation. I think they could actually kind of compete with Sony while they're down right now. And what I mean by Sony being down right now, of course, I'm talking about the Jim Ryan situation. Like, obviously, that's not good objectively that you're having a CEO step down right in the middle of a generation. We also have the Last of Us multiplayer game effectively being canceled. Like, what we're hearing is Naughty Dog laid off the entire team working on that game, and they're not going to ever say that the game is officially canceled, but it's effectively, as the quotes say, on ice right now. So I feel like the only way we'll ever see what the Last of Us Factions multiplayer game was is as a multiplayer mode for the Last of Us Part 3, which, you know, could be cool as a free add-on because it's not really built to be a full style game as Bungie decided, which is why the team was gutted and the game was kind of shut down to begin with. And after Spider-Man 2, we really don't know what's on Sony's slate going forward. Like, there are some big problems going on at Sony, and unfortunately for them, it seems like Microsoft buying all these studios and greenlighting a bunch of games is finally starting to pay off for them, right? Like, we got these big games this year like Starfield that came to the Xbox exclusively, even though, you know, Microsoft just bought a game that was already in development, if you really want to talk about it technically. Then right after that, we got the new Forza Motorsport game, which, you know, it's not really doing too bad in reviews, but it's not really doing amazing either. I saw a lot of 9s and 8s, but a lot of people were expecting 10s, and really what it seems to come down to is a lack of progression, which is the biggest problem with the Forza franchise overall. But if you compare, you know, the graphics of Forza Motorsport to Gran Turismo 7, I think that cross-generational Gran Turismo 7 release really hurt that game overall because Forza Motorsport looks a lot better in most settings. Thankfully, Sony has a huge fan base built up. Like me, obviously, I love the PlayStation 5, but there are some real problems here that I think need to be addressed, and the unfortunate thing is most of these problems take years to address, right? Like, they definitely have games in development, but rushing games out the door just to have a release schedule that's packed enough to make fans happy, that never really works out because you're going to get a rushed, unfinished game. And what we've come to love from Sony is finished games that get as much time as they need to. So the double-edged sword of that is that we're going to wait longer for games. So this is a situation where I'd love to hear from you down in the comments. If the Xbox does come out a year and a half earlier than the PlayStation 5 and there's a bunch of games to play on it day one that get next-gen upgrades and things like that, is that enough to sway you over to the Xbox side of the fence? Or is it like a situation where you'd buy the Xbox and then the PS6 later, or just wait on the PS6 and not buy the Xbox at all? Next up here, let's talk about a positive update from Rockstar Games, which I know is kind of crazy to say in 2023. Yes, we have good stuff to talk about when it comes to Rockstar Games, which really sucks, right? Like, they lost their two founders, the Hauser brothers, which is not good for future games. I feel like GTA 6 will have their writing involved in it, but after that, like, all bets are off, and we know they're working on Red Dead 3, so it'll be interesting to see how that works out without them. Also, the whole situation with the GTA trilogy, and then the news story with Red Dead Redemption, where it came out and no matter what console you played it on, it ran at 30 FPS. But the new update we got, if you're playing on the PlayStation 5, is the ability to play it at 60 FPS, and this is coming after people who had hacked PlayStation 5s were able to unlock unlock the frame rate, and then it got even worse because people who had Nintendo Switches that were hacked were able to unlock the frame rate, and it runs at a perfect 60 FPS on the Nintendo Switch across the board. So Rockstar being silent about that didn't really come off as a good look. And yeah, while they're definitely late on this update, and it's definitely fair to question why they didn't include 60 FPS in all these releases in the first place, it is nice to say better late than never, because playing this game at 60 FPS looks awesome. And this update is coming out just in time for the physical release of the game. So if you want a PS4 copy of Red Dead Redemption, it's actually more valuable now than I think it was yesterday, because if you play it on your PS4, yes, it's going to be 30 FPS, but if you pop that disc into your PS5, you're going to get a special update that allows it to run at 60 FPS. So it's really the best of both worlds. And as Digital Foundry pointed out in their deep dive video on this game, it's not really just a straight port. They actually did go in and up-res and upscale and make it look better overall than what you'd see even running it at 4K on the Xbox Series X. So overall, it's a great update. We've also been hearing rumors about a next-gen patch for Red Dead Redemption 2, so I hope this is a sign of things to come, because the more games that run at 60 FPS on the PS5, the more worth it's going to feel to most people, right? Like, getting 30 FPS games is fine and all that, I just talked about it, but the more games that we get that are 60 FPS, even if they are 2 generations old at this point. Undead Nightmare is one of the best expansions of all time. If you haven't played it, it's really like a full zombie overhaul for the entire Red Dead Redemption game. I remember when it came out, that was like a watershed moment for me as a horror gamer. I love Red Dead Redemption 1, it's one of my favorite games ever, but when I was sitting in band class, I think junior year of high school, and I got the new single for My Chemical Romance at the time from the Danger Days album, so that was sweet. And then that same day, I'm pretty sure, Red Dead Redemption Undead Nightmare was announced for $10 right around Halloween. That was one of the best Octobers ever, and now you can play it at 60 FPS on your PlayStation 5. I used to play this game every year for Halloween, and then I kind of just like got too good at it and it wasn't fun anymore, but knowing that I can play it at 60, I might have to double dip and revisit it on my PlayStation 5 this October. Third on my list here, with Spider-Man 2 right around the corner, obviously people are really excited for this game, but you know, because it's video games, there has to be a controversy with everything. But this is a controversy that honestly I don't think is fanboyism on the PlayStation side. I think it's fanboyism on the Xbox side, and it's a really bad look. And before I get too deep into this, just so you know, there are a ton of leaks out there for Spider-Man 2. This is giving me flashbacks to Halloween Kills, when the entire script leaked before the movie came out and people were responding with huge spoilers in my comments. It got really frustrating. I could definitely see the same thing happening here with Spider-Man 2, so just be careful out there because the ending for the game has leaked. But this is, again, a bad look for Xbox fans because they're just comparing weird stuff at this point. So I guess Spider-Man 2, if you want to complete everything in it, will take you around 30 hours to complete, which to me is awesome, right? Like, I am getting so sick of these games that just have endless bloat and endless things to do. One of the first games I completed this year was Dead Island 2 because it had a story that was like 12 hours long, and if you wanted to do every single side quest, like literally everything in that game, it was going to max out at 20 hours. And while there was a little bit of fetch quest bull in that game, overall it was a really good experience from top to bottom, and it's gotten even better. So if you haven't played Dead Island 2, I highly recommend checking it out. But we also had a billion incredible games come out this year, and because of that, my backlog has grown to the point where there's a lot of games that I'm not even sure I'll ever get to. Hogwarts Legacy, for example. I'm a huge Harry Potter fan. I grew up in the 90s. I had these books as they were coming out. I waited in line at Barnes & Noble for the last Harry Potter book, and I was really excited for it back in the day. I was really excited for this game until I started playing it, and I realized that not only does it have pretty bad performance issues, but it is just so bloated. There's tons of side stuff that's not really meaningful. It is cool to explore the world, but when you see what these games are, which is like cookie cutter open world games that are built on retaining your attention instead of just telling a good story and having enough content versus too much, it gets really exhausting. And it'd be so much easier to jump into these games if they weren't bloated to the point where I have to say, well, if I commit to either Hogwarts Legacy or Jedi Survivor, that's going to be my next month and a half of a game. And honestly, I'm at a point in my life where I can afford to buy the games I want, and I can afford to buy multiple games at once, so having a few games on my plate that are going to take 20 hours is much more enticing to me than a game that's going to take 50 to 100. And one of the best parts of the original Spider-Man game was the story. It had great pacing. It was like 20 hours long. It had missions that didn't reuse content. It had new stuff to do every single story mission, and the story built built up and never felt like it had padding. So if that's what they're doing for this new Spider-Man game, that's exactly what I want to see. So yeah, 30 hours is honestly a marketing point to me that gets me excited to play the game. And like the first Spider-Man game, I feel like I'm going to be able to platinum this, which is always nice on PlayStation, that their first party stuff generally has platinums that are easy to complete. So when it comes to long games, I definitely prefer long games that are like, I don't know, Elden Ring, where it feels like no matter how much of that map you explore, you're always going to find something new, or Tears of the Kingdom, where the same thing is true, instead of like Hogwarts Legacy, where it's a huge open world and it's like a side quest where you have to find 5,000 pages of a book all over the map just to get a measly upgrade that doesn't even matter. So yeah, Spider-Man 2 being 30 hours long, that's awesome. I'm all here for it. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got for you today. Make sure you let me know what you think down in the comments below. Remember to subscribe and set your notifications to all if you haven't already. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching and shape on.